Okay, here we are. This is J Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is J Brown. If this happens to be the first time you're listening, welcome to you. Everyone else, what's up? How are you holding up? Because the onslaught most certainly continues. The only question is, how are we managing? Me, I'm doing okay. I'm a little bit spent, and I'm up against the wire. I'm recording this on Mother's Day, and I had all kinds of fatherly husband duties to take care of, brunches to make, and fires to put out, metaphorically speaking. And normally, I have the intros and outros done much earlier in the day than now, but sometimes I got too many hats to try to wear at the same time, and it's a bit of a juggle. Have you seen like a juggler who's throwing a hat on his head and then juggling with the other hands? I feel like that sometimes. But we're going to do it. This is so going to happen in time. We're going to get it in under the wire. We usually do. But I'm a little bit spent. My brain's a little bit fried. All in all, though, I don't want to complain. As much as it is a continued challenge to live in this world and try to figure out how to make your way, it's still quite a wonder. You know what we did today? We went to this waterfall. My wife has a spot. My wife has a spot that she likes to go to swim. And she's gone there by herself a number of times. And I've been once or twice with her in the past, but we decided to go today. And it wasn't a good day. One of my daughters wasn't feeling well and everybody wasn't in a great mood. But we toughed it out, and the ride there was a little bit rocky. But we got there, and it's this incredible waterfall and this like swim hole. And the water was freezing. So it was essentially like a cold plunge, a family cold plunge, And when I got there, I was not in a good way. I was really feeling upset about a lot of things. I was feeling upset about the way my daughters relate to nature and the way that they relate to each other. And I was feeling like a little bit of a failed dad. Like I'm not teaching them good. And then we all took this cold plunge in the river with the waterfall coming down from the mountains. And when I got out of there, I felt a million times better, like physical pain in my body, as well as just kind of a feeling of a weight being lifted or something. It felt like cleansing waters, And it was a beautiful thing. And and for whatever it's worth, here I sit, a little bit fuzzy-brained, not sure where I'm going in this intro, but feeling some sense of reverence and gratitude, which seems to me to be an appropriate way to respond to all the uncertainty and injustice and all of it. And very much part of today's conversation with our Sriram. And Sriram has been on the show one time before, many years ago. I actually got to meet him in person at a gathering at Kripalu for the tribute to TKV Desikachar that Leslie put together with some people. You could go back and listen to it in the archive. It's a fantastic episode. And this is just a perfect continuation. He studied directly with TKV Desikachar. He had experience with Krishnamacharya firsthand, and it was an opportunity for me to ask him what they might have thought about some of these things I've been talking about on the show, about Atman and Brahman and God and higher power and some of these things. And he brings such an important perspective, and I'm just so grateful for this conversation and another couple that are coming. There's been some really wonderful threads getting tied together for me in all these conversations. And I'm very, very happy and blessed to have these opportunities to talk to people like Sriram. And I'm very happy to share it with you today. Real quick before we get to it, I do have a couple announcements. First, I got a couple of in-person gigs, July 29th in Garden City, New York. Also, September 23rd and 24th, a weekend in Manchester, England. It would be great to see you there. If that's not possible, there are still lots of other ways for us to connect. If you go to jbrownyoga.com, there's a full range of options for as little as $5 a month. You can have a podcast premium subscription and have access to the full archives of this show, which is quite a resource. Or there's other subscriptions, live classes, discussion groups, all the way through to my year-long teacher training, which you can start at any time right now for half the regular price until August. There's something there, hopefully, for whatever might work for you. And you can find out about all of it, the in-person gigs and all of the other stuff I'm doing at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, I think that's gonna have to do. I will touch base with you on the other side for a brief moment, but let's go ahead and get into this. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with R. Sriram. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Sriram.
Hi. Hello.
We are here in voice-to-voice communication.
Yeah.
Oh,
lovely.
So nice to be with you. I am already recording, and I would like to consider us having just begun, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, it's fine. It's perfect. Yeah.
Oh, so good. So good. Well, I've been thinking of you. It's been 5 years since we met in that little room at Kripalu and recorded a conversation for this show. And it feels like a lifetime ago almost.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah, it's 5 years only, but yes, lots of things have happened on my side too.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I so appreciate you taking up my invitation. Thank you. Thank you for this time today.
Yeah, welcome. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the session now.
Very good. And have you been well? Has everything been okay with you?
Yeah, things have been well. I've just returned from India and I'm back here in Germany. So I keep shuttling. We keep shuttling half a year here, part of the year here, and part of the year in India. So we always need some time to sort of get readjusted to where we are. And we are here since about a couple of weeks. Yes. So getting adjusted still. Otherwise, doing well. Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. And in a way, that's kind of a perfect example of why I reached out to you, because you straddle both the East and West.
Yes, it's become part of my fate or perhaps my destiny. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I remember when we spoke last, and I would be happy to point people to that conversation. They can go back and listen to it. It did talk about sort of like how you got to yoga and your childhood and meeting Desikachar. And then we got into like the scandals and stuff and other things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And today I really want to get into some things with you that really do have to do with you straddling both of those worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned to you in my email, and it's sort of funny to me. It's like, it's hard to, find a way to kind of ease yourself into a conversation about things like Atman and Brahman, you know?
Yes, it is, of course.
It's hard to like casually warm your way into those conversations.
Yeah.
But, you know, I recently had a talk that will post before this one. Mm-hmm. And in that talk, you know, I kind of presented to someone named Hari Kirtana Das, a wonderful man, a very smart in yoga philosophy. And I kind of presented to him sort of what's been going on with me over the last few years. You know, I I think like many people, there's been a lot of soul searching going on. And in that, first I was having conversations about like energy and consciousness and like morphic resonance and remote healing. And I was very interested in kind of like the problems of a reductionist, materialistic worldview that we seem to be living under, And yoga seemed very much to be one of the reasons why I was so passionate and kind of like spent my whole adult life inquiring into yoga, is because it pointed to something that wasn't bound by those limitations and that felt more expansive to me. At the same time, I came to yoga almost as a rejection of the like Judeo-Christian religions of my parents, or I should say the like hypocritical 1980s versions of them in Los Angeles, California that I grew up in, I did not have a good experience of religion, and I saw yoga almost as a way for me to be spiritual without religion. You hear that all the time, spiritual but not religious, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that in that, there's something very empowering about that. Like, I've even heard you talk about it in interviews. We talk about being able to separate actions from results and kind of feel that you have like a willpower that can affect your life. And I did that. I think I got myself into a much healthier place. I got myself into a good direction. And I think that that's why I became very inspired by Desikachar, because he was the teacher that was saying, take these teachings and make them relevant to you and your culture. He wasn't trying. We talked about that last time you were here, that I wasn't having to take on any other culture or try to like fit to anything else. It was fitting to me, and I was supposed to make it make sense for me. So then let's just fast forward, or say, especially over the last year, there was some very big personal challenges for me with my daughter. People who listen to the show know, like, they've all been on this ride with me, because these conversations have been me like working through all of this,
I see. Okay.
And in those experiences, I started talking about intuition and receiving guidance from somewhere, and ultimately like a higher power, and then even God, which I think is kind of what Brahman is sometimes referring to. So all of this is to say, it does feel to me like different teachers taught different things. I've been most inspired by Desikachar and Krishnamacharya, and you studied with both of them. So I'm curious, what direct teachings, if any, did you get from them about Brahman or the idea of a higher power? And then maybe just what are your own personal feelings or ideas or holdings around that?
Well, let's go with these two persons who have been teachers to me and myself, and how maybe I would look at what is deep religiousness or what the idea of Brahman is. Let's say for Krishnamacharya, as I sort of, as my impression tells me, my impression of him tells me, and of course of Desikachar, with whom I've had a lot of exchanges about the subject, and of course my personal view. So starting with Krishnamacharya, I mean, going by my impression of him through the hours where I have sat in a classroom where he was there, and my biggest impression of Krishnamacharya, you must remember, he was 60 years older to me. So he came from he was far away from me in terms of reality. My personal reality of my life was very, very different to his. So in that sense, I couldn't compare myself to him, and I could also not put myself completely into his shoes, so to say, get into his shoes. But I would have said that he's somebody, for me, he represented certain spirituality in a very, very simple way, which is, like things are sort of showering on you and you don't feel them or you don't see them. It's like, things are moving left and right around you and about you and all around and from above and below, and you are who you are, what you are, in sense of you're living in a space which is absolutely yours, but not blind. Because many people are like that. People who are maybe, mentally absent, they also like this, but this is not mental absence. It's a sort of a very deep form of being connected to some other source, so that all that's happening here doesn't impinge on you at all. So I had this impression. I don't know whether I was projecting something into him, or whether it was just a combination of his eyes, his posture, his voice, and whatever he was teaching, So I had the impression that here sat a person who was constantly my laptop is connected to a source in the wall, which feeds current, and he was connected to some source which was feeding him with some sort of energy. So I think this is not an abstract energy which he was linked to, but a concrete reality which he may have called something like, I don't know, maybe Narayana or Brahman. Narayana is maybe in the sort of Vedic tradition, maybe the word with which you sort of associate Brahman. Brahman is a very abstract word. Narayana is a less abstract word for the same idea. So probably in that sense, I think Krishnamacharya, being linked to such an idea all the time, he sort of floated through life. And at the same time, he was, of course, very, very observant, because he was there. He knew who was in front of him, what he had to speak, and how he had to explain. So he was a very, very alert human being. So in that sense, whether he was 88 when I first met him, or later on when I met him, later on, with 1992, 94, 96, etc., through the rest of his life, there was the same alertness, and I think all this had to do with a certain type of religiousness or Brahma understanding, which is definitely unique. Because I've seen a lot of people who are very religious, who are very religious in a very passionate way, but here was a man who was religious in a sense of he was attached all the time to something, and he stayed linked to it. And that, I would say, was how I understood Krishnamacharya's understanding of Brahma, or the way he saw it. Desikachar, I have learned a lot of Upanishads from Desikachar, and these Upanishads speak about Brahman. Brahman is a sort of constant subject of these Upanishads. In as much we have had a lot of exchanges, and also he being who he was, also a lot of exchange about, am I religious? Are you religious? And what is religiousness today? And do we need to go to temples, etc., etc.? So,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there was that book, one of the first books that we ever got access to was called Religiousness in Yoga, if I remember, was the title.
Exactly. And I think it was one of the books which impressed me most. Even today, it's one of the best books I would say on the subject of yoga. Mm-hmm. It's astounding the way he's combined philosophy and practicalities and practice sessions, asanas, pranayama, etc. Anyway, to come back to his idea of religiousness, he was surely not religious in a conventional sense, like what you're talking about your, San Francisco background, or as we know in India, and people in their religious, they go to temples, etc. In fact, he was somebody who hardly ever went to temples, and, he didn't take much interest in all these external ritualities.
Yes, I remember you telling a story about him walking out while someone in orange robes was speaking, and he did. He's like, I don't have time to listen to this guy or whatever. And you were shocked. I remember. Yeah.
I think he had a problem with saffron and orange robes. So he was really, in that sense, anti-religious in sense of conventional religion, and I think it was for a very good reason, because he didn't want his own precious space to be sullied by what is being spoken of out there, which is really often pure fanaticism, or pure narrow-mindedness, or pure bigotry, or whatever, So he didn't want that holy space, which he was probably creating with his own yoga practice, to be sullied by it. That's why he kept off that track. And this is something I learned from him, that you have to protect your space. And this is something which I learned not in a conversation, but also through all these Upanishads, I've learned from him that religiousness is a very, very personal affair. It's very personal. I mean, you don't talk about your deepest, let's say, feelings or even pleasures or sorrow. I mean, maybe you can't even express it. And sometimes you say, I don't want to express it. If it's a sorrow, you will express it maybe. But if it's the deepest pleasure, you don't express it. You think, oh God, if I talk about it, then it'll go away. I lose it. We have this sort of a feeling, it's too precious to sort of put it into the banal form of words. So you want to keep the pristine, that divinity behind this experience. So in that sense, a deep religious experience is something very personal. We don't have to express it. We don't have to speak about it. We don't have to tell anybody, oh, I had it. We don't have to prove to anybody that we are religious. We really don't have to prove to anyone. I remember one day I was driving from Heidelberg in Germany to Munich along with him in a car. And this is exactly the conversation he had, because he suddenly told me, because he had been previously to some other places here in Europe to other students, and he said, Sriram, people ask me whether I'm religious at all. What is your opinion? So he was prodding. He was trying to make me, is ferreting out of me what I think about religiosity and his feeling of religiousness or absence of a feeling of religiousness. So this is exactly what he's trying to ferret out. That is something very, very personal. So nobody has to know that you are religious, So I think this is something which I really appreciated when he taught me this Upanishads, because this is also the core of the Upanishad teaching, that this Brahman is it's so much beyond words, beyond form, that the moment you try to put into a form, into any form, it's going to disappear from your hands, or from you. And in that context, he told me a story, and he said it's from Vishnu Purana. He said there's this the people were bothering Brahman very much, and they were all saying, Narayana, give me something, Narayana, give me something, Narayana, I'm having this problem, Narayana. So they were all bothering Narayana endlessly, and Narayana got fed up and said, oh God, I must get away from these beings which are bothering me. I must find a place to hide. So Narayana went straight there where nobody will find him, and that is the heart of every living being. He went right there into the tiniest, subtle and most central point of their being, and hid himself there and said, here I'm safe. Nobody is going to find me so easily. So actually, if you want to find him or it, if you want to find it, you'll have to go there, and which is the center of you. And that's why you try doing yogasanas, or you do pranayama, or you meditate, to come to that point deep within your fuses, in your body, which your breath takes you to, or your mind takes you to. So you come to that point. So I think this is what Brahman is about, or is about in the eyes or in the interpretation of Desikachar, as much as I know.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for that. And I definitely get what you're saying in terms of, that a religious experience is deeply personal. And that's very much in line with the way that yoga seemed to be passed from Desikachar, that it was about personal practice and relationship. And I think that I've certainly, and I've talked about it recently on this show, like I overthink stuff, and it, like, too much information at a certain point, or talking about it more, it isn't always helpful. I will say, though, that when someone does have what feels like a religious experience, which was shocking to me, I'm someone who comes to these experiences very skeptically. You want to understand it.
Yeah, I understand.
And so that's why I think I've been trying to have conversations about it. And I would say that you used the word holy. You said a holy space. And so the point about it, like religion being like these trappings that are actually not helping people, or like essentially like power and control a lot of times. That's not what I'm talking about. This conversation I had that I mentioned, Hari Kirtana Das, he gave a definition of religion that was from its etymological root, and it had to do with like reconnecting to source as a way to heal your soul.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it does seem like if Narayana is inside me, in my heart, in the Hridaya, right?
That's right, yeah.
If they're residing there in me, I get that. I can see that, like, that's like that I was created and that's in me, right?
Yeah.
But then it does get a little bit more sticky in a way if I do try to contemplate, okay, is that connection to it is the classical whatever question about Atman and Brahman and whether they are like the same or whether they can be distinguished. And in a practical sense, because as you said, Brahman is such a like broad, sometimes hard to grasp kind of word or concept. It has to do with whether or not like the force that's at work, like the intelligence that's at work behind like the plants and my breath and the wind is just like a force that's at work, or whether there is actually like a being, like the word Hari Kirtana used was supreme being, and the word being was the key. And he also referenced Krishnamacharya's markings on his forehead, and how they were certain markings that associated with, I believe it's Ramanuja from Vedanta school of thought, that does kind of hold a supreme being, as opposed to somebody else like BKS Iyengar or Patañjali who had like the horizontal lines and it was different. So I guess I'm curious if you can speak to any of that for me today.
Oh, well, I can't speak about these lines markings, but what I can definitely say is that this idea of a being, it is very much there in the sense. I'm sure for somebody like Krishnamacharya, there was no question about it. See, the thing is, in yoga, we have this idea of a mind, of a chitta, of a person, of us human beings with our minds and with our mental imbalances and mental phases of mental peace and happiness, etc., and phases of sorrow on the one hand. And then we have sometimes something which we call a glimpse of an inner voice or an inner eye, which is looking, and we are just sort of spectators, where we are so totally untouched. So where there seems to be something which we can name the mind, and something which we can name the witness within us. So these two sides seem to be there to our soul or to ourselves. But beyond these two selves or these two facets of ourselves, the one being very variable, ups and downs, etc., the other one being fairly constant and always being a sort of accompanying, witnessing, calm inner self. And beyond this, there is an idea of a Purushottama, as Bhagavad Gita says, a sort of special Purusha, a Purusha which is encompassing all the Purushas, all the living beings in this planet, in the universe. So there is an idea of a special Purusha, of a special being, which is higher, which is all-encompassing, and which is sort of the source. So who is the source? We use the English word being, and if we are going to get trapped into all the associations we have with the word, I'm being good, I'm being very naughty, I'm being a divine, etc. If we are going to associate all this with that word being, or we say, oh, he's a great being, she's a great being, etc., and we would sort of use the word being to refer to individuals, then maybe we'll be moving away from the idea of this particular being. So this particular being is beyond that type of an individuality It's only individual in the sense that it's more than you and me or any other being on this planet, which has got a beginning and an end. So that's the whole thing about it. It doesn't have a beginning. It doesn't have an end. So there is no concept of time for this being. So that's why it's an endless line. Whether if you draw it on the forehead, it's an endless line which goes into endlessness, Whether you draw it this way, in which maybe Patabi Joyce might have done it in a horizontal way, or Krishnamacharya might have done it in a vertical way. It's a line which is pointing to sort of endlessness, So in that sense, So, but it is not only endless, it's also in terms of space. Because if I look at a divine person, a really beautiful mystic, a really honest mystic, I'm sure, I'm convinced, or people are convinced, and we are speaking about this, and then we are saying, okay, the name of this person is, and we give that person a name. Let's say somebody who's living today, or somebody who's supposed to have lived historically, maybe Patañjali or something. But we have given this particular person a space. Namely, Patanjali lived then and there, wrote this and that book. So we have given the Patanjali a certain form. And this other mystical person of today or for last year, of last century, also a form. Whereas if we are talking about this being, it's also beyond form. So it's also beyond space. So there is no question of it being contained within anything. Within a certain form, as a human being, or as a male human being, or as a female human being, or as an animal or a plant. So it's beyond space too, definitely. And that's the idea of Brahman, something which is timeless and spaceless, And so we can relate or even understand a being which sort of corresponds to this dimensionlessness, I would say, not to these dimensions, but this dimensionlessness. Then maybe we are close to the idea of what that being is. And that's the thing, coming back. I mean, I don't know the episodes with your daughter, what you were talking about, but I just want to tell you that today, if you stand somewhere, if you stand in front of some fields or a forest, or even stand at the ocean, at the shore, and look into the water of ocean or a river bed or whatever, if you look and you see this vastness, and you see sand, and you see water, and you see the air moving, and the leaves moving, and the trees, and whatever else you might see, birds flying in helicopters, and you might hear all sorts of stuff. If everything becomes a sort of unison, or it becomes one gets a glimpse of this, So this has two effects on me. One, it puts me into a certain ecstasy where I think, my God, it's like sitting in some sort of a symphony, and everything is sitting perfectly, and you're amazed. So you're happy, and this is a beautiful experience. That's the one experience, which is maybe a moment or a few moments, and it's very joyful. And the other is you come out of that experience, and two things happen. One is you feel blessed. You are happy, and you have a certain memory of this experience, and you have stored it away, and you sort of maybe look back to it and hope it'll settle on you again, this experience, or you work towards this experience consciously. The other thing which can happen is you get desettled by this experience. The experience doesn't desettle you. The reality around unsettles you, I'm sorry. It unsettles you because you can't go back there, and you don't know what you're doing here, and you suddenly had a glimpse that that's truth, and it's awful. It's like it's like suddenly somewhere you meet somebody and said, I'm your mother, and it's absolute truth, and that person disappears, and I said, my God, all this while I thought this was my mother, and suddenly I met my real mother, and I can't find her anymore. So this is a horrible truth. So for many people, it can also, it can make them go berserk, to sort of really unsettle them badly. So, but still, it's an experience. So one has to learn to not only cope with it, but also to take the best out of it?
Well, I think that a lot of people who end up staying with yoga for their whole lives have had these glimpses that you call, as you say, we've glimpsed in like a shavasana or whatever,
exactly.
like a moment that felt like we felt into something that felt infinite, something that felt timeless and spaceless like that.
Yeah.
And I think that, a lot of people who I've talked to about this do hold this very, I guess you're calling it like an Advaita position, but it is all one. And there's a oneness to that. And I can feel that. I guess where the kind of more debate has come in for me is where that can lead to different things, where that experience of the infinite, if we're all one, then there's sort of like there's no good or evil, and that force becomes very impersonal in a way. And I think sometimes in like the modern Western culture, it's played into like this idea of progress, and basically everybody's trying to be God. Like, and in another way, which feels like another kind of non-duality, because it's still based on the same, like Narayana is in me, you know what I mean? It's still coming from within me. Like the relationship to this being, as you were saying, it's not like I ask for things and then I get them and I'm rewarded or not. You know what I mean? It's not that dynamic. I think that's the misperceptions around the idea of religion, that if I do good things, then I'll be rewarded. And if I don't do good things, then I'll be punished. Like, I don't think of it that way. I think of it like you were saying, like there's a relationship that I'm having to what feels like a source. And if I'm relating to that as kind of an impersonal thing, then it's like all on me. But if I'm relating to it in a way that feels more, I guess, like humble or devotional, like I have some free will. Sure, I'm making choices. I'm doing what I think is the right thing and being who I think I should be. But there's some part of what's going on here that's, most of it actually is completely out of my hands. And relating to that uncertainty, or whatever is governing that uncertainty, is kind of what I'm talking about. If it's this pure non-dual idea, then it's like there's it feels like it's not a personal relationship. But in my life, when I'm on my knees because things are really tough, it feels very personal,
I understand.
So I guess I'm curious, do you think that I don't even know what my question is in that. I guess is for you, I guess the question would have to be you to speak from your own personal experience. Do you pray? Do you think of a higher power in a more personal relationship kind of way? Or is it more of a force that you're just part and parcel of, and it's not such a like personal relationship like that?
Well, a few things are very important for me. For instance, I remind myself fairly regularly that my willpower is limited. And when I say I remind myself, I tell myself now and then, but of course it's there at the back of my mind most of the time. I try to keep it there most of the time, And I know this is, but this is not a defeatist or defeatist, or it's not a thought of resignation, because I am doing my things. But for me to realize, to acknowledge that my willpower doesn't sort of, is not what is behind all I'm doing. It's very, very important for me, because it's the only thing which can guard me from, like surprises and disappointments in life. So it's almost like a strategy. You understand? To stay mentally balanced, it's become a strategy almost. And of course, it's not a mere strategy to say stay healthy or stay psychologically healthy. It's a truth. It's a philosophical truth. I mean, you can look at it from an agnostic or even a theistic point of view. It ends up being a truth. I mean, because we cannot dictate how our life is going to be or should be. I mean, we cannot. We can aim to the Mars, but I mean, we still have to leave it to the gods, so to say. Whether we get there or not. I mean, well, if we would be extremely, strong-headed and have such a strong will, even then we'll have to acknowledge that there is a power which is above us. That's one important thing. The other thing is, there is a prayer which, we do at the end of each thing. It says, with my body, with my mind, with my speech, whatever I do, it is all happening because of the natural force of Prakriti which is going through me, which because of the natural force of the force of nature which is sort of working through me. Yeah. And therefore, whatever I'm doing, whatever is happening is not my thing. It's happening because of the force of nature. And therefore, whatever I'm doing, I'm offering it to a higher force. So this is sort of physical or verbal, and of course, a bhava, an attitude. It's an attitude which accompanies this prayer or this thought, or speaking out this sentence. And it's a very important thought because that brings me down to the level where I know, okay, I might have done a spectacular asana, pranayama practice, or I've done something very nice, and somebody told me, oh, how nice that you are here, and I like you very much, or whatever, But to acknowledge that there is some force which is working through you, which is making things go right. It's also psychologically, it's a very sound attitude, because
there's actually some science. I had someone on this show that talked about how people have like a strong spiritual core like that, have like thickened cortical walls in their brains even, and that it helps them against depression and anxiety.
Yeah, for instance, So, because it guards me even against, what do you call mishaps, so if things go wrong, I don't have to think it's all because of me, it doesn't exonerate me from mistakes I make. The other thing also, it doesn't mean I can give up and not bother about doing things correctly anymore.
Yeah, because that doesn't go well. If you just try to completely give everything over to God, it doesn't work.
It doesn't. So in that same sense, I can't also, say, okay, if mishap happens, it's not me, it's nature working through me.
Yeah, see, you got to take responsibility. Yeah,
we are taking responsibility. It doesn't remove the responsibility from me. So that attitude is, but it diminishes the weight of even mishaps, bad luck or whatever you may call it. So I think that's very important. And a third thing which is very important to me is an idea called, I don't know the English word for it. It's called Vinaya, which I've learned it very much from also Desikachar and from Krishnamacharya. This word Vinaya, it translates something like humility. So this humility is a very important idea, because we never know, we are on top of the world, and we never know when we are going to hit the bottom, and sometimes the climb, what do you call, it's so steep on the fall is so steep that we are there in no time. So one has to have a lot of humility in that sense, and this humility is something beautiful because it bends the head down. But as we as yoga practitioners know, bending the head down doesn't mean stooping or bending the back. So you don't lose your individuality, you don't lose your core, you don't lose your self respect or self-esteem. So bending down without losing on self-esteem, not buckling down in front of anybody, not revering somebody and becoming all scared and overawed, but bending down in great respect. So there's sort of a deep respect where there is no cringing behind it. Yeah.
Yes, and I guess isn't there in that also sort of like an element of faith, maybe? Or didn't Desikachar talk about, was it Shruti or something like that?
Yeah, there is. He spoke a lot about the word Shraddha.
Shraddha, that's the one. That's right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Shraddha. Yeah. So this Shraddha is something like, it's something which, it's not blind faith. And it's not that faith which is expecting a return. Oh, like I have faith in my son that he will pay back all that I've given him and take care of me when I'm old.
That sounds like a blind faith to me. No, I'm
Okay. No, but this is the faith of parenting in India. When the children are small, we take care of them, and when we are old, they take care of us.
Yes, yeah.
So you have faith in the children, and you love them, and you're there for them, and you take a lot of interest in them, etc., and expect that return. So very often in life, when we have this type of faith also working in us, or we are blindly putting faith in somebody who exploits us or cheats us or whatever. So both aspects of faith, the blindness as well as this, expecting a return, they are not real faith. So if you leave those two sides of faith out, then you have a more, what do you call, pure, balanced faith, which is faith by itself. And because faith is not depending on faith is not depending on the external factor, faith is a force which is coming from within you.
So it's like a somatic state or something.
Yeah, it's a somatic feature. Yeah, it's a somatic feature. Yeah, exactly. It's a feature of. It's a feature which. It's a part of our. Yeah.
Well, I guess the other questions I have around this also have to do with maybe like J Krishnamurti and the Theosophical Society. I had somebody on, Dawn Holloman, and she told us all these amazing stories about J Krishnamurti. I know you met him. I don't remember your age. I don't know if you met him before or after he departed from the Theosophical Society. Maybe it was after, but I'm curious. I know he was very like anti, like, don't let anybody teach you how to meditate. And like, he was very like anti a lot of those like power structures. But people held him up as kind of like a enlightened being, and he rejected that. But I guess I'm curious, did he ever speak to any of these things in terms of a higher power? Was he at all devotional himself, or was he just very more intellectual and rational as a teacher in your experience?
Oh, listen, first of all, I have met Krishnamurti only a few times.
Okay.
And of course, it's all much, much, much later than the time when he was with the Theosophical Society. I wouldn't have even been born at that time.
I made you very old, didn't I?
Exactly, sorry. I guess. So anyway, but coming back to it, see, I have read a few books and writings of his. I have listened to a few of his lectures, sat a few times in his lectures in Chennai, in Madras, where he visited every year and gave lectures. And from these lectures, what I recall is that he's very rational, of course. And of course, from his books too, is an extremely rational person. He has very rational thinking, and even the way.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.